My name is Isabella Martinez, 28 years old, and last year my family demanded I co-sign a $150,000 business loan for my brother's tech startup. When I refused, they called me selfish and cut me out completely. But what the FBI revealed during their investigation into what my brother was really doing with that money shook our entire family to its core. Before we jump back in, tell us where you're tuning in from, and if this story touches you, make sure you're subscribed, because tomorrow I've saved something extra special for you. Growing up in Denver, Colorado, I learned early that financial responsibility wasn't just about having money, it was about earning respect. While my older brother, Caleb, was busy charming his way through life, I was working double shifts at a local coffee shop throughout high school, saving every penny for college. By the time I was 22, I had graduated debt-free with a degree in accounting and landed my first job at a mid-sized firm downtown. My relationship with money was shaped by watching my parents struggle during the 2008 recession. Dad lost his construction job and Mom's hours at the hospital got cut. I remember being 14 years old, sitting at our kitchen table as they spread out bills, their faces etched with worry. That image burned itself into my memory. I promised myself I would never feel that helpless, that vulnerable. Caleb, who was 17 at the time, he seemed to live in a different reality. While our parents stressed about mortgage payments, he was asking for money to go to movies with friends. When Dad explained we couldn't afford it, Caleb would sulk for days, making everyone feel guilty until Mom would somehow find $20 to give him. Even then, I could see the pattern forming. Caleb's needs always seemed to prioritize, even when resources were scarce. Fast forward 10 years, and I had built everything I dreamed of. I owned a modest but beautiful townhouse in a quiet neighborhood, drove a reliable car that was completely paid off, and had a 6-month emergency fund sitting in my savings account. More importantly, I had excellent credit, a 780 score that I'd carefully cultivated through years of responsible financial habits. No late payments, no maxed out credit cards, no risky investments. My coworkers often joked that I was boring with money, but I preferred to think of it as smart. My brother Caleb, on the other hand, had taken a very different path. At 31, he had already filed for bankruptcy once, defaulted on 2 car loans, and had a credit score that hovered somewhere in the low 400s. He had a talent for big ideas and even bigger promises, but his follow-through was consistently lacking. He'd started at least 4 different businesses over the years: a dropshipping venture that lasted 3 months, a cryptocurrency trading scheme that lost him $15,000, a food truck idea that never got past the planning stage, and most recently, a social media marketing agency that folded after 6 months when clients started demanding refunds. Despite this track record, Caleb never seemed to learn from his mistakes. Each failure was someone else's fault: bad partners, market conditions, unfair competition, or just bad luck. He had an explanation for everything and a new opportunity always waiting in the wings. Our parents, Frank and Susan, continued to enable his behavior, bailing him out financially whenever his latest venture collapsed. "He just needs one good break," Mom would say whenever I questioned their decision to lend him money again. "Caleb has so much potential. He just needs the right opportunity to show what he can do." Dad was usually more skeptical, but he always gave in when Mom pleaded Caleb's case. "Family takes care of family," he'd say with a resigned shrug, writing another check to cover Caleb's rent or car payment. I tried to stay out of these family dynamics as much as possible. I had my own life to focus on, my own goals to achieve. I visited my parents regularly, always brought thoughtful gifts, and helped out with household repairs when needed. But I drew a clear line when it came to Caleb's financial disasters. I wouldn't lend him money, wouldn't listen to his business pitches, and definitely wouldn't get involved in his schemes. This position often made family gatherings awkward. Caleb would corner me at birthday parties or holiday dinners, enthusiastically explaining his latest idea and how I could get in on the ground floor. When I politely declined, he'd usually make some comment about how I was too conservative or afraid to take risks. Our parents would exchange glances, clearly uncomfortable with the tension, but they never called him out on his behavior. The dynamic became even more complicated when Caleb married Nicole 3 years ago. Nicole was sweet and well-meaning, but she had bought into Caleb's vision of himself as a misunderstood entrepreneur. She often defended his failures and encouraged his new ventures, genuinely believing that the next idea would be the one that changed everything. At family dinners, she would gush about Caleb's brilliant business mind and how he was ahead of his time. I felt sorry for her, watching her pour her teacher's salary into Caleb's dreams while her own needs went unmet. By the time this story really begins, I had achieved a level of financial stability that my younger self could only dream of. I was promoted to senior accountant at my firm, earning a comfortable salary that allowed me to save aggressively while still enjoying life. I took nice vacations, ate at good restaurants, and had a small but growing investment portfolio. More importantly, I had peace of mind. I slept well at night, knowing my bills were paid, my future was secure, and I wasn't dependent on anyone else for my financial well-being. I had no idea that this carefully constructed security was about to be threatened by a single phone call from my brother. The call that would test everything I believed about family loyalty, financial responsibility, and the courage to trust my instincts when everyone around me was telling me I was wrong. Looking back now, I can see that this was always where we were heading. Years of different values, different priorities, and different definitions of what it means to be responsible had created a fault line running through our family. It was only a matter of time before something came along to trigger the earthquake that would change everything. That something turned out to be a business loan application for $150,000, and my brother's absolute certainty that I owed it to him to put my financial future on the line to make his dreams come true. What I discovered about what he really planned to do with that money would make me grateful for the rest of my life that I had the strength to say no, even when saying no felt like the hardest thing I'd ever done. To understand how deep the dysfunction in my family ran, I need to take you back to our childhood. The patterns that would eventually lead to that devastating phone call were established long before any of us were old enough to recognize them. Caleb was born when I was 3 years old, and from the moment he arrived, he commanded attention in a way that seemed almost supernatural. As a baby, he was colicky and demanding, requiring constant care that left our parents exhausted. As a toddler, he was charming and precocious, able to win over strangers with a smile and adults with his quick wit. But beneath that charm was a growing sense of entitlement that our parents seemed powerless to address. I remember being 5 years old, watching Caleb throw a tantrum in the toy store because he wanted an expensive remote control car. Instead of teaching him that we couldn't afford it, Dad worked extra hours for 2 weeks to buy it for him. When Caleb broke it 3 days later by driving it into the swimming pool, there were no consequences. Instead, Mom spent the afternoon consoling him about his accident. Meanwhile, when I asked for a new bike because mine was too small, I was told I needed to wait until my birthday. When my birthday came, I got a used bike from a garage sale that needed repairs before it was safe to ride. The message was clear. Caleb's wants were treated as needs, while my actual needs were treated as requests to be considered later. This dynamic only intensified as we got older. In middle school, Caleb was diagnosed with ADHD, which our parents used to explain away every behavioral issue. When he failed classes, it was because teachers didn't understand his learning style. When he got in trouble for disrupting class, it was because the school wasn't accommodating his needs. When he forgot his homework or projects, it was because his brain worked differently and expecting him to remember was unfair. I watched our parents hire tutors, pay for organizational coaches, and meet with school administrators weekly to advocate for Caleb. They spent thousands of dollars on specialists and treatments, always searching for the magic solution that would help him succeed. Meanwhile, I was expected to be self-sufficient. When I struggled with algebra in 8th grade, I was told to figure it out or ask a friend for help. The really damaging part wasn't the unequal treatment itself. It was how our parents justified it.
They convinced themselves that Caleb needed more help because he faced greater challenges, while I was naturally responsible and didn't require the same level of support. They created a narrative where helping Caleb was compassionate and necessary, while helping me was unnecessary because I was already capable. This narrative became so ingrained that I started to believe it myself. I took pride in being the easy child, the one who didn't cause problems or make demands. When I wanted something, I found a way to earn it myself rather than ask for help. When I faced challenges, I worked through them independently rather than expect rescue. I thought I was being mature and responsible, but really I was learning that my needs didn't matter as much as Caleb's wants. High school brought new challenges and familiar patterns. Caleb was popular and charismatic, easily making friends and charming teachers. But his academic performance was inconsistent, and his behavior became increasingly irresponsible. He would skip classes to hang out with friends, lie about homework assignments, and manipulate teachers into giving him extensions and extra credit opportunities. When he got caught cheating on a major history exam junior year, our parents' response was predictable. Instead of holding him accountable, they blamed the teacher for not providing adequate accommodations. They hired a lawyer to challenge the school's disciplinary action and demanded that Caleb be allowed to retake the exam. The message to Caleb was clear. There would always be someone to rescue him from the consequences of his choices. Meanwhile, I was working 20 hours a week at the coffee shop, maintaining a 3.8 GPA and saving every dollar for college. When I applied for scholarships, I did the research and filled out the applications myself. When I needed recommendation letters, I built relationships with teachers and asked for help appropriately. When I had to choose between social activities and work shifts, I usually chose work because I understood that my future depended on my efforts, not on someone else's intervention.
The disparity in our parents' expectations became most obvious during college planning. Caleb applied to expensive private schools with no realistic plan for paying tuition, confident that somehow the money would materialize. Our parents took out a second mortgage to pay for his first year at a prestigious university, telling themselves it was an investment in his future. When Caleb struggled academically and socially that first year, our parents' response was to hire more specialists and pay for additional support services. When he changed majors 3 times and took 6 years to graduate with a degree in communications, they celebrated his persistence rather than questioned his decision-making. When he graduated with $80,000 in student loan debt and no job prospects, they welcomed him back home and supported him while he figured things out. By contrast, I attended a state school on partial scholarships and worked my way through college, graduating in 4 years with a practical degree and minimal debt. I moved out immediately after graduation, started my career, and became financially independent. Our parents were proud of my success, but they treated it as expected rather than exceptional. The most telling moment came during Caleb's post-college years, when he was living at home and cycling through various jobs and schemes. During one particularly difficult family dinner, I suggested that maybe it was time for some tough love, that continuing to enable Caleb's dependence wasn't helping him grow. Dad's response was swift and harsh. "Isabella, not everyone can be like you. Some people need more support to find their way. Just because you're naturally disciplined doesn't mean everyone else should be judged by your standards." Mom nodded emphatically. "Caleb has a different path than you do. Success looks different for different people. We need to support him in finding his own way." The implication was clear. I was being selfish and judgmental for suggesting that Caleb should be held to basic standards of accountability. Wanting him to face consequences for his choices was somehow cruel and unrealistic. This conversation planted the first seeds of doubt about my family's version of reality, though it would be years before I fully understood how distorted their perspective had become.
The call that would change everything came on a Tuesday evening in March. I was at home reviewing client files for the next day's meetings when my phone buzzed with Caleb's name on the screen. We hadn't spoken in almost 2 months, which was typical for our relationship. Our interactions were usually limited to family gatherings and the occasional text message on birthdays or holidays. "Isabella, perfect timing!" His voice boomed through the speaker with that familiar enthusiasm that usually meant he wanted something. I have incredible news, life-changing news. You're going to be so excited when you hear this. I set down my papers and braced myself. Caleb's incredible news usually involved some new scheme that would require other people's money to fund his dreams. But there was something different in his voice this time, a confidence that seemed more solid than his usual desperate optimism. "I'm listening," I said cautiously. "Remember my friend Shane Wilson from college, the guy who was always into computers and coding?" Caleb's words tumbled out rapidly, barely pausing for breath. "Well, he's been working in Silicon Valley for the past 5 years, and he just developed this revolutionary app that's going to transform how small businesses manage their inventory and customer relationships." I remained silent, knowing that any response would only encourage him to continue his pitch. "Isabella, this isn't like my other ideas. This is real. Shane has the technical expertise, the industry connections, everything. The app is already built and tested. We just need startup capital to launch properly and scale the business. We're talking about potentially millions in revenue within the first 2 years. "And what exactly is your role in this revolutionary app?" I asked, already knowing the answer would be vague. "I'm handling the business development side, marketing, client acquisition, investor relations. You know how good I am with people. Shane's brilliant with technology, but he needs someone who can sell the vision, build relationships, make things happen in the real world." This was vintage Caleb. He had identified someone with actual skills and convinced them that his charm and enthusiasm constituted a valuable business contribution. I'd seen this pattern before with his previous ventures. He would find someone with talent or resources, position himself as an essential partner, and then leverage that relationship to pursue funding or support. "So, what do you need from me?" I asked, though I suspected I already knew. "Well, here's the thing. We need a business loan to get started. $150,000 to cover initial marketing, some additional development costs, and operating expenses for the first year. The bank is willing to approve the loan, but they want a co-signer with excellent credit as additional security, someone with a stable income and a proven track record of financial responsibility." His voice took on a coaxing tone. "Isabella, you're the only person I know who fits that description perfectly." I closed my eyes and took a deep breath. "Caleb, I'm not comfortable co-signing a loan for that amount. That's a huge financial risk and—" Wait. Let me explain why this is actually a great opportunity for you two. We're offering you a 5% equity stake in the company for just co-signing. You wouldn't have to invest any actual money, but you'd own part of what could become a very valuable business." This was classic Caleb manipulation, reframing a request for help as an opportunity I should be grateful for. He was asking me to risk my financial security and credit score for the privilege of owning 5% of a company that existed only in his imagination and his friend's untested app. I appreciate the offer, but I don't think it's right for me. I have my own financial goals and responsibilities. Co-signing a loan that large would affect my debt-to-income ratio and could impact my ability to make my own financial decisions. The silence on the other end lasted long enough that I wondered if the call had dropped. When Caleb finally spoke again, his tone had shifted from enthusiastic to incredulous. "Are you serious right now? Isabella, this is your brother asking for help. This isn't some random investment opportunity. This is family. And I'm not asking you to give me money. I'm asking you to use your good credit to help me access money that I'll be paying back. But if something goes wrong, if the business fails, I'd be responsible for the entire loan amount. Co-signing means I'm legally obligated to pay if you can't. That's a risk I'm not willing to take." "Nothing's going to go wrong." Caleb's voice was rising now, frustration bleeding through his forced patience. "Shane knows what he's doing. This app is going to be huge.
You're talking about failure before we've even started.
I'm talking about being realistic about risk, I replied. Every business venture involves risk, and most startups fail within the first 2 years. I can't bet my financial future on any business plan, no matter how promising it sounds. So you're just going to say no? Just like that? Your own brother comes to you with the opportunity of a lifetime, and you're going to turn your back on family? The conversation was following a predictable pattern. Caleb had moved from enthusiasm to persuasion to guilt. Next would come anger, followed by accusations of selfishness and threats to involve our parents. I'm not turning my back on family, I said carefully. I'm making a responsible financial decision. If this business opportunity is as solid as you say it is, there should be other options for funding. Traditional investors, small business loans based on Shane's credit alone, crowdfunding. Those options take time we don't have, Caleb cut me off. There's a narrow window for getting this app to market before competitors emerge. We need to move fast, and having a co-signer is the quickest path to the capital we need. I could hear Nicole's voice in the background, though I couldn't make out her words. Caleb covered the phone for a moment, having a muffled conversation with his wife. When he returned, his tone had shifted again, becoming more calculated. Look, Isabella, I understand you need time to think about this. It's a big decision, but I need you to understand how important this is. This isn't just about me and Shane. Nicole and I are trying to start a family, and we need financial stability. This business could change our lives, could give us the future we've been working toward. The emotional manipulation was escalating. Now he was using Nicole's desires for children as leverage, making me responsible not just for his success, but for their family planning. It was a sophisticated guilt trip, designed to make any refusal seem heartless and selfish. I'll think about it, I said, though I already knew my answer wouldn't change. Can you send me the business plan and financial projections? I'd want to review everything carefully before making any decisions. Of course! I'll email everything tonight. Isabella, I really think when you see the numbers, when you understand the potential here, you'll realize this is an opportunity we can't pass up. After hanging up, I sat in my quiet living room, feeling the weight of the decision ahead. I knew that saying no would trigger a family crisis. I knew that my parents would get involved, that there would be accusations of selfishness and betrayal. But I also knew that co-signing a $150,000 loan for Caleb's latest venture would be financial suicide. What I didn't know was that this was only the beginning, and that the pressure I was about to face would test everything I believed about family loyalty and my own moral compass.
The business plan arrived in my inbox at 11:47 p.m. that same night, along with a lengthy email from Caleb that read more like a sales pitch than a family communication. The subject line was, "The future is now, Martinez Tech Solutions launch plan," complete with a logo that looked like it had been designed in 15 minutes. I spent my lunch break the next day reviewing the documents, and what I found confirmed my worst fears. The business plan was essentially a copy-paste job from online templates filled with buzzwords like synergistic solutions and disruptive innovation, but lacking any concrete market analysis or realistic financial projections. The revenue estimates were wildly optimistic, assuming they'd capture 5% of a market they'd never actually researched. There was no mention of competition, no detailed marketing strategy, and no contingency plans for the inevitable challenges that face any startup. Most telling was the section on personnel. Shane Wilson was listed as CTO with impressive technical credentials, but Caleb had given himself the title of CEO and Director of Business Development, with responsibilities that included strategic vision implementation and stakeholder relationship optimization. It was corporate speak for, "I'll be the face of the company while Shane does all the actual work." That evening, I called Caleb to discuss my concerns. I tried to approach the conversation diplomatically, focusing on specific questions about market research and competitive analysis, rather than attacking the plan directly. "Have you and Shane done any surveys to validate customer demand for this type of inventory management system?" I asked. "Isabella, we don't need surveys. Shane has been in the industry for years. He knows what businesses need," Caleb replied dismissively. Sometimes you have to trust your instincts and move fast, rather than getting bogged down in analysis paralysis. But the financial projections assume you'll acquire 200 paying customers within the first 6 months. How exactly do you plan to reach that goal? That's where my expertise comes in. I've already identified several networking events and trade shows where we can connect with potential clients. Plus, I have ideas for a social media campaign that could go viral. Every answer revealed the same pattern of vague strategies, unrealistic assumptions, and complete confidence despite a total lack of supporting evidence. When I pressed for details, Caleb became defensive and accused me of being negative and unsupportive. Look, if you don't believe in the business, just say so. Don't hide behind questions and technicalities. Either you trust me or you don't. It's not about trust, Caleb. It's about being realistic about risk and having a solid plan. So that's a no, then? You're going to let your own brother's dreams die because you're too scared to take a chance? I told him I needed more time to consider everything, which bought me a few days of peace before the real campaign began. The first call came from Mom on Friday evening. She started with casual conversation about work and weather, before steering toward the real purpose of her call. Caleb mentioned he shared a business opportunity with you, she said carefully. He seemed really excited about it. He did. I'm still reviewing everything. You know, Isabella, your father and I have been talking, and we're really impressed with how motivated Caleb has been lately. He's been working so hard on this project with Shane. It's wonderful to see him so passionate about something. I could hear the setup coming. Mom was establishing the narrative that Caleb was finally turning his life around, and that supporting this venture was supporting his personal growth. Nicole told me they're hoping to start trying for a baby soon. Caleb wants to be financially stable before they take that step. It's so responsible of him, don't you think? There it was, the emotional hook. Now my decision about co-signing the loan wasn't just about a business loan. It was about Caleb's maturity, his marriage, and potential grandchildren for my parents. That's nice, Mom, but starting a family and starting a business are both major decisions. Maybe they should focus on one at a time. Oh, Isabella, you know how these things work. Sometimes opportunities come along when you least expect them. Caleb doesn't want to miss his chance. The conversation continued for another 20 minutes, with Mom carefully planting seeds of guilt and obligation. She never directly asked me to co-sign the loan, but the message was clear. A good sister would support her brother's dreams. Dad's approach was more direct when he called Saturday morning. After minimal small talk, he cut straight to the point. Your mother tells me you're hesitant about helping Caleb with his business loan. I have concerns about co-signing such a large amount, I replied honestly. Isabella, I understand being cautious with money. I taught you to be responsible, and I'm proud of how well you've managed your finances. But sometimes family responsibilities require us to take calculated risks. A $150,000 loan is not a calculated risk. It's a massive financial exposure with no guarantee of return.
But it's not really your money at risk, he argued. Caleb will be making the payments. You're just helping him access the loan. This was the fundamental misunderstanding that made these conversations so frustrating. My family genuinely seemed to believe that co-signing was just a formality, a signature that helped someone else get money. They couldn't or wouldn't acknowledge that co-signing made me legally responsible for the entire debt. If Caleb defaults on the loan, I'm responsible for paying it back, I explained, plus interest and penalties. It would destroy my credit and potentially bankrupt me. Caleb's not going to default, Dad said firmly. He's committed to making this work. And frankly, Isabella, I'm disappointed that you don't have more faith in your brother. The conversation devolved from there, with Dad becoming increasingly frustrated by my negativity and lack of family loyalty. He ended the call by saying he hoped I would reconsider before making a decision I'd regret. Sunday brought a surprise visit from Nicole, who appeared at my door with homemade cookies and tears in her eyes. She had clearly been crying, and her usual cheerful demeanor was replaced by desperate sadness. Isabella, I hope you don't mind me coming by. I just needed to talk to someone, and I didn't know where else to go.
We sat in my living room while Nicole explained how much this business opportunity meant to Caleb, how it represented his chance to finally prove himself and build the life they've been dreaming of. "He's been different lately," she said, twisting a tissue in her hands. "More focused, more determined. I haven't seen him this excited about anything in years. He stays up late working on business plans and researching the market. He's really putting everything into this." I felt genuinely sorry for Nicole. She loved Caleb and believed in him completely, which made her a powerful weapon in the family's pressure campaign. Her tears weren't manufactured like some of the other emotional appeals. She was genuinely scared that I might destroy her husband's dreams. "Nicole, I understand how much this means to both of you," I said gently. "But co-signing a loan this large would put my own financial security at risk. If something goes wrong—" "Nothing's gonna go wrong," she interrupted, echoing Caleb's confident assertions. "Shane is so smart, and Caleb has so many ideas for marketing the app. They complement each other perfectly." But even if they're both brilliant, most new businesses struggle for the first few years. There are so many factors outside their control. "Don't be selfish, Isabella," Nicole said suddenly, her sadness transforming into anger. "I know you've always looked down on Caleb, always thought you were better than him because you're more organized and responsible. But this is his chance to show everyone what he can do." The accusation stung because it touched on my deepest fears about my family relationships. Had I been judgmental? Had my focus on financial responsibility made me arrogant and unsympathetic? "I don't look down on Caleb," I said quietly. "I want him to succeed. I just can't risk everything I've worked for to help fund a business venture." Nicole left soon after, taking her cookies with her and leaving me with a heavy heart and growing dread about what would come next.
The final confrontation came exactly 1 week later, orchestrated with military precision at our monthly family dinner. I should have seen it coming when Mom insisted we meet at their house instead of our usual restaurant, claiming she wanted to cook Caleb's favorite meal. I arrived to find the entire family already assembled in the living room like some kind of intervention staging. Caleb sat on the couch with Nicole beside him, her hand resting supportively on his knee. Mom and Dad occupied their usual chairs, but their posture was formal, serious. The atmosphere felt heavy, with unspoken expectations and barely contained frustration. "Isabella, come sit down," Mom said, patting the empty chair they'd positioned directly across from everyone else. "We need to have a family discussion." My stomach dropped as I realized this was an ambush. They had planned this moment, probably rehearsed their talking points, and positioned me as the defendant in a trial where the verdict had already been decided. Dad cleared his throat and took the lead, his voice carrying the authoritative tone he used when he wanted to end arguments rather than have them. "We've all been talking, and we're concerned about your response to Caleb's business opportunity. This family has always supported each other through challenges and celebrations, but you seem to be forgetting what that means." "I haven't forgotten anything," I replied, trying to keep my voice steady. "I've been thinking carefully about the risks and responsibilities involved in co-signing such a large loan." "Thinking or making excuses," Caleb interjected, his earlier charm replaced by barely controlled anger, "because from where I'm sitting, it looks like you've already made up your mind to let me fail." Mom leaned forward, her eyes glistening with tears that seemed to appear on command. "Isabella, honey, I don't understand what's happened to you. You used to be such a caring, generous person. When did you become so cold and calculating?" The accusation hit like a physical blow. Cold and calculating? Was that really how my family saw me? Had my focus on financial responsibility transformed me into someone heartless? "I'm not being cold," I said, my voice cracking slightly. "I'm being realistic about what co-signing means. If this business fails, I'd be responsible for $150,000 in debt. That would destroy everything I've worked for." "But it's not gonna fail," Nicole said earnestly. "Shane has so much experience, and Caleb has been working harder than I've ever seen him work. They have everything figured out." Dad stood up and began pacing, a sure sign that his patience was wearing thin.
Let me put this in perspective for you, Isabella. Your brother is asking for help accessing money that he will pay back. You're not giving him $150,000. You're not investing in his business. You're simply using your good credit to help family. That's not how co-signing works, Dad, I protested. If Caleb can't make the payments for any reason, I become responsible for the entire loan, plus interest, plus penalties. It could ruin my credit score and impact my ability to buy a house or make other financial decisions for years. So you don't trust your own brother to honor his commitments? Caleb's voice was rising now, his face flushed with indignation. After everything our parents have done for both of us, after all the support this family has given you, you won't take a small risk to help me succeed? $150,000 liability isn't a small risk, I said firmly. And this isn't about trust. Even trustworthy people can face circumstances beyond their control. Businesses fail, emergencies happen, economic conditions change. Stop! Mom's voice cut through my explanation like a knife. Just stop with the excuses. We all know what this is really about. You've always resented Caleb, always thought you were better than him because you got good grades and found a stable job. Now you have a chance to help him achieve his dreams, and you're choosing to sabotage him instead. The room fell silent except for the ticking of the grandfather clock in the corner. Everyone was staring at me, waiting for my response to an accusation that felt so fundamentally wrong, I didn't know how to address it. I don't resent Caleb, and I don't think I'm better than him. But I also can't risk my financial security for any business venture, regardless of who's involved. So that's your final answer? Dad asked, his voice cold with disappointment. You're going to turn your back on family when we need you most? I looked around the room at these people who had shaped my entire life, who I loved despite our complicated dynamics. Caleb was glaring at me with open hostility. Nicole was crying silently, her dreams apparently dying before her eyes. Mom looked heartbroken and betrayed. Dad appeared disgusted by my selfishness. For a moment, I wavered. The pressure to give in, to avoid this confrontation, to preserve family harmony was overwhelming. Maybe I was being too rigid, too focused on worst-case scenarios. Maybe family loyalty did require taking risks for people you love. But then I thought about my grandmother, Emma's wisdom echoing in my mind. Mija, the people who truly love you will never ask you to sacrifice your security for their dreams. Emma had always been the voice of reason in our family, the one person who saw through manipulation and emotional blackmail. Yes, I said, my voice stronger than I felt. That's my final answer. I will not co-sign this loan. The explosion was immediate and devastating. Caleb jumped to his feet, his face contorted with rage. I can't believe you're doing this to me, to us. He gestured wildly toward Nicole, who was now sobbing openly. You're destroying our future because you're too selfish to take a tiny risk for family. It's not a tiny risk, I said, standing up as well, and calling me selfish doesn't change the financial reality of what you're asking. Get out, Dad said suddenly, his voice quiet but filled with venom. Isabella has made her choice. She's chosen money over family. Well, she can live with that choice, but she doesn't get to do it here. I felt like I was watching this scene happen to someone else, my family. The people who were supposed to love me unconditionally were casting me out because I wouldn't risk financial ruin for a business plan that any objective observer would recognize as deeply flawed. Fine, I said, grabbing my purse and jacket, if that's how you want it. I walked toward the door, half expecting someone to call me back, to say they didn't really mean it, that we could work something out. But the only sound was Nicole's continued sobbing and Caleb's angry muttering about selfish sisters and destroyed dreams. At the door, I turned back one last time. I love all of you, and I hope someday you'll understand that I'm not doing this to hurt Caleb. I'm doing it because co-signing that loan would be irresponsible for both of us. Save your excuses, Caleb spat. Just go. The door slammed behind me with a finality that echoed through the quiet neighborhood. I sat in my car for several minutes, hands shaking, before I could trust myself to drive home. That night, I changed my phone number and blocked my family's email addresses. If they wanted to communicate with me, they would have to make a genuine effort rather than continuing their harassment campaign. I knew this decision would be seen as further proof of my selfishness, but I also knew I couldn't withstand weeks or months of guilt trips and emotional manipulation. For the first time in my life, I was completely on my own, cut off from the people who had defined my identity and shaped my understanding of family loyalty. It was terrifying and liberating in equal measure. What I didn't know was that my decision would soon be vindicated in ways I never could have imagined.
The silence from my family lasted exactly 3 weeks. During that time, I threw myself into work, taking on extra projects and staying late at the office to avoid the emptiness of my apartment. My best friend, Riley Foster, became my lifeline, checking in daily and reminding me that setting boundaries wasn't selfish. It was necessary for self-preservation. "You did the right thing," she would say whenever I expressed doubt. "A real family wouldn't have given you an ultimatum like that. They would have respected your decision, even if they disagreed with it." Riley's support was crucial because the isolation was crushing. I had never realized how much of my social life revolved around family gatherings until those invitations stopped coming. No more Sunday dinners, no more birthday celebrations, no more casual phone calls about weekend plans. The silence felt like punishment for having the audacity to protect my financial future. Then, on a Thursday morning in early May, my phone buzzed with a notification from Facebook. Caleb had posted a photo of himself and Shane Wilson standing in front of a sleek downtown office space, both wearing matching polo shirts with a logo that read, "Tech Flow Solutions." The caption was triumphant. "Dreams become reality when you surround yourself with people who believe in your vision. Official launch day for Tech Flow Solutions. Ready to revolutionize how small businesses manage their operations. Hashtag entrepreneur life, hashtag tech startup, hashtag dream team." The post had dozens of likes and congratulatory comments, including effusive praise from our parents about how proud they were of Caleb's determination and business acumen. Nicole had shared the post with her own caption, "So proud of my husband for never giving up on his dreams. Here's to the future we're building together. Hashtag power couple, hashtag startup life." I stared at the photos, trying to process what I was seeing. Somehow, Caleb had secured the funding without my co-signature. The office space looked expensive: polished concrete floors, exposed brick walls, modern furniture that probably cost more than my monthly salary. This wasn't the scrappy startup operation I'd imagined when reviewing their business plan. Over the following weeks, my social media feeds were flooded with updates about TechFlow Solutions. Professional photos of Caleb in business meetings, screenshots of their apps interface, inspirational quotes about entrepreneurship and persistence. Shane Wilson maintained a much more modest online presence, occasionally sharing technical updates about their development progress, but Caleb had apparently appointed himself as the company's primary marketing department. The most striking post came 2 months after launch. Caleb had shared a photo of himself signing what appeared to be a significant contract, surrounded by people in expensive suits in what looked like a corporate boardroom. "Just closed our biggest client deal yet," he wrote. "When you deliver innovative solutions that solve real problems, success follows naturally. TechFlow Solutions is officially profitable. Hashtag success story, hashtag innovation, hashtag profitable." I found myself experiencing a complicated mix of emotions: relief that I hadn't been needed for their success, but also confusion about how they'd managed to secure funding and grow so quickly. According to Caleb's posts, they had gone from startup to profitable company in less than 8 weeks, which seemed remarkably fast for any business, especially one run by someone with Caleb's track record. My parents' Facebook posts during this period were particularly painful to read. Dad shared an article about supporting young entrepreneurs with the comment, "So proud of family members who pursue their dreams with determination and surround themselves with people who believe in their vision." The implication was clear. I was not someone who believed in family dreams.
Mom posted a photo from what appeared to be a celebration dinner at an upscale restaurant, showing Caleb, Nicole, Shane, and themselves raising champagne glasses. Her caption read, "Celebrating success with the people who matter most. Sometimes the biggest risk is not taking any risk at all." So grateful for family members who understand that supporting each other's dreams is what family is all about. Each post felt like a knife twist designed to remind me that I had chosen financial caution over family loyalty and missed out on celebrating Caleb's triumph. The message was clear. They were all succeeding without me, and my concerns had been proven wrong. But as the summer progressed, I began noticing subtle inconsistencies in the social media narrative. Caleb's posts about client meetings and business growth continued, but Shane Wilson's technical updates became less frequent. The office photos showed the same polished space, but there were never any shots of actual employees working or evidence of the rapid scaling that Caleb claimed was happening.
More concerning were the financial clues hidden in plain sight. Nicole posted photos of expensive purchases, designer handbags, jewelry, a luxury vacation to the Bahamas that seemed inconsistent with a startup that should have been reinvesting every dollar into growth. Caleb was driving a new BMW, which he justified in one post as investing in professional image for client meetings, but the timing seemed odd for someone whose business had only recently become profitable. The most telling sign came from an unexpected source. Riley worked in digital marketing for a mid-sized consulting firm, and during one of our weekly coffee dates, she mentioned something that made my blood run cold. "You know, it's funny," she said, stirring sugar into her latte. "My company has been looking for exactly the kind of inventory management solution your brother's startup supposedly offers. I thought about reaching out to them, but when I tried to find their app in the marketplace, I couldn't locate it anywhere." "What do you mean?" I asked, though a sick feeling was already forming in my stomach. "Their website looks professional and they have all the right buzzwords, but I can't actually find their product for download or purchase. Usually tech companies make it really easy to access their apps, but TechFlow's website just has contact forms for enterprise consultations and testimonials from clients I can't verify." That evening, I did my own research. Riley was right. There was no publicly available TechFlow app in any of the major software marketplaces. Their website was beautifully designed, but strangely vague about their actual product offerings. The client testimonials mentioned impressive results, but didn't include verifiable company names or contact information. I tried searching for news articles or industry coverage about TechFlow solutions, thinking that a company growing as rapidly as Caleb claimed would have attracted some media attention. Instead, I found nothing. No press releases, no industry recognition, no mentions in local business publications that typically covered promising startups. The LinkedIn profiles told a similar story. Shane Wilson's profile listed him as CTO of TechFlow Solutions, but his previous work experience was primarily as a freelance developer with gaps in employment that didn't match Caleb's claims about his Silicon Valley success. Caleb's profile, meanwhile, was filled with buzzwords and vague descriptions of his role, but no concrete accomplishments or verifiable metrics. Preparing and narrating this story took us a lot of time, so if you are enjoying it, subscribe to our channel. It means a lot to us. Now back to the story. As autumn approached, I began noticing changes in the tone of Caleb's social media posts. The triumphant business updates became less frequent, replaced by motivational quotes about perseverance through challenges and weathering difficult seasons. Nicole's expensive purchase photos stopped appearing, and her posts became more focused on generic lifestyle content rather than celebrating their startup success. The first real crack in the facade came in October, when I received an unexpected phone call at work. The caller ID showed a number I didn't recognize, and the woman on the other end identified herself as Amanda Brooks from First National Bank. "Ms. Martinez, I'm calling because your contact information was listed as a reference on a business loan application for TechFlow Solutions. We're conducting routine verification calls, and I wanted to confirm your relationship with Caleb Martinez and your knowledge of their business operations." My heart started racing.
I'm Caleb's sister, but I'm not involved with his business in any way. I didn't provide any references or support for any loan applications." There was a pause. "That's interesting. According to our records, you were listed as a personal reference who could speak to Mr. Martinez's character and business acumen. The application also indicates that you had initially been approached to co-sign, but declined due to personal reasons, not concerns about the business viability." "What kind of loan are we talking about?" I asked, though I was afraid to hear the answer. "I can't share specific details, but I can tell you it's a significant amount for business expansion purposes. Given your response, I think we need to investigate this application more thoroughly." After hanging up, I sat at my desk trying to process what I just learned. Caleb was apparently applying for additional loans, using my name as a reference without my permission, and misrepresenting the reason I hadn't co-signed the original loan. This suggested that either the business wasn't as successful as he claimed, or there was something else going on that required additional funding. That evening, I made a decision that would change everything. I called Amanda Brooks back and asked her to document my concerns about the loan application. I also requested information about how to report potential fraud if someone was using my name without authorization. What I learned during that conversation would set in motion a chain of events that would expose the truth about TechFlow Solutions and vindicate my decision to trust my instincts, even when it cost me my family.
Amanda Brooks called me back 3 days later, and the urgency in her voice immediately told me that my concerns had been justified. She had conducted a thorough review of Caleb's loan application and discovered several red flags that went far beyond using my name without permission. "Ms. Martinez, I need to ask you some specific questions about your brother's business," she said. "Are you aware of any clients or contracts that TechFlow Solutions has secured?" "Only what I've seen on social media," I replied honestly. "Caleb has posted about signing major deals and acquiring clients, but I don't have any direct knowledge of their operations." "We've been unable to verify any of the client references listed in their application. The companies they claim to have contracts with either don't exist or have no record of working with TechFlow Solutions. Additionally, the revenue figures they've provided don't match any documentation we can authenticate." My stomach dropped. "What are you saying exactly?" "I'm saying we suspect that material misrepresentations may have been made in this loan application. We're required to report potential fraud to the appropriate authorities, and we wanted to give you an opportunity to clarify your involvement before we proceed." I spent the next hour on the phone with Amanda, providing a detailed account of my family's pressure campaign, Caleb's history of failed business ventures, and my concerns about the original business plan. She took careful notes and explained that the bank would be conducting a formal investigation into TechFlow Solutions' financial claims. That weekend, I made a decision that felt like another betrayal, but was necessary for my own protection. I contacted attorney Rebecca Stone, who specialized in financial fraud cases. I needed to understand my legal exposure if Caleb was indeed committing fraud while using my name as a reference. Rebecca's office was located in a downtown high-rise, and her credentials covered one entire wall: law degree from Stanford, certifications in financial crimes, recognition from various professional organizations. She listened to my story without interruption, taking detailed notes and occasionally asking clarifying questions. "Your instincts were absolutely correct," she said when I finished. "Co-signing that loan would have made you legally responsible for whatever fraud your brother was committing. The fact that he's now using your name without permission suggests he's escalating his deceptive practices." "But what can I do to protect myself?" I asked. "If he's telling people I'm involved with his business, couldn't that damage my reputation?" "We're going to document everything," Rebecca replied. "I'll draft a formal letter to the bank stating that you have no involvement with TechFlow Solutions and that any use of your name or information was unauthorized. We'll also file a police report about the identity theft, which will create an official record of your non-involvement." As Rebecca began her documentation process, I found myself drawn into a deeper investigation of Caleb's activities. What I discovered made me realize that the situation was far worse than I had imagined.
Using public record searches and business databases that Rebecca had access to, we uncovered a pattern of deception that went back months before Caleb had even approached me about co-signing the loan. TechFlow Solutions had been incorporated as a legitimate business entity, but the financial records told a troubling story. The company had received not one, but three separate loans totaling nearly $300,000. The first loan, for $75,000, had been secured using Shane Wilson's credit and a business plan similar to what Caleb had shown me. The second loan, for $125,000, had been obtained from a different bank using falsified revenue reports and fake client contracts. The third loan application, the one that had triggered Amanda Brooks's call to me, was for another $100,000 and included the unauthorized use of my name as a character reference. This is classic loan fraud, Rebecca explained as we reviewed the documents. They're using money from one loan to make payments on previous loans while fabricating business success to qualify for increasingly larger amounts. It's a pyramid scheme disguised as a tech startup. The most damning evidence came from the corporate filings, which showed that Shane Wilson had actually withdrawn from the business as an active partner just 6 weeks after incorporation. According to the documents, Shane had discovered fundamental disagreements about business practices and ethical standards and had terminated his involvement. This meant that for months, while Caleb was posting photos of their partnership and claiming Shane's technical expertise, Shane Wilson had no longer been involved with TechFlow Solutions. I felt physically sick reading these revelations. Shane Wilson, the person whose technical credentials had made the business seem legitimate, had apparently discovered something that made him abandon the venture entirely.
Rebecca helped me understand the broader implications of what we were uncovering. Your brother isn't just lying to banks, she said. He's created an elaborate fiction that involves fake clients, fabricated contracts, and misrepresented partnerships. The money he's been flaunting on social media, the expensive office, the luxury purchases, the business trips, it's all funded by fraudulent loans. The investigation also revealed why Caleb had been so desperate for me to co-sign the original loan. The first two loans had been relatively small amounts that he could obtain based on Shane's legitimate credentials and modest fabrications. But as his lifestyle inflation grew and his debt service requirements increased, he needed larger amounts that required stronger financial backing. My excellent credit and stable income would have enabled him to access significantly more money and maintain the fraud for a longer period. If you had co-signed that loan, Rebecca explained, you would have become an unwitting accomplice to a federal crime. When the scheme inevitably collapsed, you would have been financially responsible for the debt and potentially faced legal consequences for enabling the fraud. As autumn turned to winter, the evidence continued to mount. Amanda Brooks kept me informed about the bank's investigation, which had expanded to include the FBI's Financial Crimes Unit. Other banks had been contacted and were discovering similar patterns of deception in their loan portfolios. What had started as routine verification of my reference had uncovered a much larger fraud operation. During this period, I maintained complete no contact with my family. I had changed my phone number and blocked all their social media accounts, so I wasn't seeing Caleb's continued posts about business success. But Rebecca's investigator was monitoring TechFlow's online presence, and she shared periodic updates that showed the facade was beginning to crack. By December, Caleb's social media posts had shifted dramatically. Instead of celebrating contracts and client acquisitions, he was posting vague messages about seasonal challenges in the tech industry and temporary setbacks that strengthen successful entrepreneurs. The expensive office space appeared to have been abandoned, with the TechFlow website displaying a message about transitioning to remote operations for enhanced efficiency. More telling were the posts that weren't appearing. Amanda Brooks's expensive purchase photos had stopped entirely, and her social media presence had become minimal. Our parents' proud celebrations of Caleb's entrepreneurial success had been replaced by silence. The people who had been so eager to celebrate his triumph and condemn my lack of support had apparently realized that something was seriously wrong. The first public crack in the facade came just before Christmas, when a local business journal published an article titled,
Tech Startup Under Investigation for Loan Fraud. The article didn't mention TechFlow by name, but it described a case involving a Denver-based software company that had obtained hundreds of thousands of dollars in fraudulent business loans using fake client contracts and misrepresented partnerships. I read the article with a mixture of vindication and sadness. My decision to refuse co-signing had been proven absolutely correct, but there was no satisfaction in watching my brother's life implode. Despite everything that had happened between us, I didn't want to see Caleb destroyed. I had wanted him to succeed legitimately, to find a path that didn't involve deception and fraud. But as Rebecca reminded me, the consequences Caleb was about to face were entirely of his own making. I had offered him the gift of a sister who cared enough to say no when yes would have enabled his destruction. That he had chosen to interpret my refusal as betrayal rather than protection was a reflection of his character, not mine. The real reckoning was still coming, and when it arrived, it would shatter every assumption my family had made about loyalty, support, and the difference between helping someone and enabling their self-destruction.
The call that changed everything came on a frigid Tuesday morning in January. I was reviewing quarterly reports at my office when Rebecca Stone's name appeared on my phone screen. Her voice was tight with urgency and disbelief. "Isabella, you need to sit down. The FBI investigation has uncovered something that goes far beyond simple loan fraud. Can you come to my office immediately?" An hour later, I sat across from Rebecca in her conference room, where she had spread out documents, photographs, and computer printouts that looked like evidence from a major criminal investigation. Special Agent Jennifer Walsh from the FBI's Financial Crimes Unit was also present, her badge and serious demeanor making the situation feel surreal. "Ms. Martinez," Agent Walsh began, "what I'm about to share with you is part of an ongoing federal investigation, but you have a right to know because your identity was used extensively in these crimes." She opened a thick folder and pulled out the first document, a bank statement that made my blood run cold. It was from an account labeled TechFlow Solutions Client Escrow, and it showed deposits totaling over $800,000 over a 6-month period. "Your brother wasn't just committing loan fraud," Agent Walsh explained. "He was running a sophisticated investment scam using the TechFlow business as a front. He was soliciting investments from individuals and small businesses, promising guaranteed returns from his revolutionary app technology." Rebecca added, "The investors thought they were buying equity stakes in a legitimate tech startup. Caleb showed them the same fabricated client contracts and revenue projections he used for the loan applications, but he also added something else. He told them his sister, a successful accountant, had personally vouched for the business plan and was considering joining the company as CFO. I felt the room spinning around me. He told people I was going to be the CFO? Not just that, Agent Walsh continued, pulling out printed emails. He created an entire fictional narrative about your involvement. According to investor testimonies, Caleb claimed you had initially invested $50,000 of your own money in the business and were recruiting additional investors from your professional network. The emails were devastating to read. Caleb had written to potential investors using professional language that sounded nothing like his usual communication style. Quote, "My sister, Isabella Martinez, CPA, has conducted extensive due diligence on our business model and financial projections. Her professional endorsement and financial commitment demonstrates the solid foundation of TechFlow Solutions. As a respected accountant with deep connections in the Denver business community, Isabella's involvement provides additional credibility and access to capital markets." End quote. "How many people invested?" I asked, dreading the answer. 43 individuals and 12 small businesses, Agent Walsh replied. The amounts ranged from $5,000 to $75,000 per investor. Many of them are retirees who invested their life savings based on Caleb's claims about your professional endorsement. Rebecca pulled out victim impact statements that made me want to vomit. A retired teacher had invested $25,000 from her pension fund because Caleb's sister, the accountant, had personally verified the numbers.
A small business owner had put in $50,000 because if a professional CPA was willing to risk her own money and reputation, it must be legitimate. An elderly couple had invested their entire savings of $35,000 because they trusted the family business that had professional financial oversight from Caleb's sister. The total amount stolen from investors is $847,000. Combined with the fraudulent loans, your brother orchestrated a scheme that frauded banks and individuals of over $1.1 million. But the revelations weren't finished. Agent Walsh opened another folder that contained surveillance photos and financial records that revealed the true scope of Caleb's deception. Your brother wasn't using this money for business development, she explained. The FBI has traced the funds to personal expenditures that would make your head spin. He purchased a vacation home in Aspen for $280,000, bought luxury cars totaling $150,000, and spent over $100,000 on gambling in Las Vegas casinos. The photos showed Caleb at high-stakes poker tables, living in a penthouse apartment, and vacationing in exotic locations, none of which had appeared on his social media feeds. While he was posting about business challenges and seasonal setbacks, he was actually living like a millionaire playboy using money stolen from elderly retirees and small business owners. Nicole knew? I asked, thinking about her sudden shift from expensive purchases to social media silence. We believe Nicole discovered the truth sometime in November, Agent Walsh replied. Bank records show she withdrew $15,000 from their joint account and moved into a separate apartment. She's been cooperating with our investigation and has provided crucial evidence about Caleb's activities.
Rebecca explained the legal implications of what we were learning. Because Caleb used your name and professional credentials to solicit investments, you could have been charged as a co-conspirator if we didn't have clear evidence of your non-involvement. The documentation we created when you first contacted us has been crucial in establishing your innocence. What about my parents? I asked. Do they know? Agent Walsh and Rebecca exchanged glances before Agent Walsh answered, Your parents received a visit from federal agents last week. They were questioned about their knowledge of Caleb's activities and their financial support of TechFlow Solutions. She pulled out interview transcripts that revealed another layer of betrayal. According to the FBI notes, my father had admitted to giving Caleb an additional $35,000 to help with business expansion in October. My mother had provided $12,000 from her retirement account to support her son's entrepreneurial dreams. But the most shocking revelation came in my father's statement. We knew Isabella was being unreasonable about not supporting her brother. When Caleb told him he had found other investors who appreciated his vision, we wanted to show our support. We didn't know there were problems with the business. According to the transcripts, my parents had continued to enable Caleb's fraud even after casting me out of the family for refusing to co-sign. While they were publicly celebrating his success and condemning my lack of support, they were privately funding his criminal activities with their retirement savings. Your parents lost their entire retirement fund, Agent Walsh said gently. The money they gave Caleb was spent on his personal expenses, not business development. They're going to face significant financial hardship as a result of this fraud. I sat in stunned silence, trying to process the magnitude of what I was learning. My family had sacrificed their financial security to support the brother whose fraud scheme I had refused to enable. The parents who had called me selfish and disloyal had ultimately become victims of the very person they had chosen to support over me. There's one more thing, Rebecca said, pulling out a final document. Shane Wilson has provided a detailed statement about why he withdrew from the business. According to his testimony, he discovered in September that Caleb was soliciting investments using Shane's technical credentials and claiming partnerships that didn't exist. When Shane confronted him, he offered him $25,000 to stay quiet and let things play out. Shane refused and immediately withdrew from the business. The picture was now complete. Shane Wilson, the technical expertise that had made TechFlow seem legitimate, had discovered Caleb's fraud early and had the integrity to walk away rather than become complicit. Meanwhile, my family had continued supporting and enabling Caleb's criminal activities while treating me as the villain for refusing to participate. When will Caleb be arrested? I asked.
He already has been, Agent Walsh replied. Federal agents took him into custody this morning at the Aspen property. He's facing charges of wire fraud, bank fraud, identity theft, and money laundering. If convicted on all counts, he's looking at 15 to 20 years in federal prison. As I walked out of Rebecca's office that afternoon, I felt a complex mixture of vindication, sadness, and profound relief. My gut instincts had been proven correct in ways I never could have imagined. Refusing to co-sign that loan hadn't just protected my credit score, it had saved me from becoming an unwitting accomplice to a federal crime that destroyed dozens of innocent people's financial security. But there was no joy in being right. The brother that I had grown up with, despite all his flaws, was facing decades in prison. The parents that had raised me were now facing poverty in their retirement years, and the family that had been so quick to condemn my selfishness was about to discover the true cost of enabling someone's destructive behavior.
The news of Caleb's arrest broke in the local media 3 days after our meeting with the FBI. The Denver Post ran a front-page story with the headline, "Local Tech Entrepreneur Arrested in $1.1 million Fraud Scheme," complete with photos of the Aspen property and luxury cars that had been purchased with stolen money. The article detailed how Martinez had used his sister's professional credentials to lend credibility to fraudulent investment solicitations, which resulted in dozens of interview requests that I declined through Rebecca's office. The most painful part of the media coverage was reading the victim impact stories. The retired teacher who had invested her pension spoke to reporters about how she now couldn't afford her medications. The elderly couple faced foreclosure on their family home. The small business owner had to lay off employees because the money he invested was supposed to fund payroll expansion. These weren't abstract financial crimes. They were devastating attacks on real people's lives and dreams. Caleb's first court appearance was a media circus. I watched the coverage from home, seeing my brother in an orange jumpsuit, looking pale and defeated as the federal prosecutor read the charges against him. The judge denied bail, citing Caleb as a flight risk, given the large amounts of unrecovered funds and his access to multiple properties purchased with stolen money. During the arraignment, Caleb's defense attorney entered a plea of not guilty, which seemed delusional given the overwhelming evidence the FBI had compiled. But Rebecca explained that this was likely a negotiating tactic to secure a plea bargain that might reduce his eventual sentence. The call I had been dreading came 2 weeks after Caleb's arrest. My mother's voice was barely recognizable, hoarse, broken, aged by years in the span of days. "Isabella," she whispered into the phone, "it's Mom. Can you please talk to me?" I had maintained no contact for almost 8 months, but hearing her sound so destroyed broke something inside me. "I'm here, Mom." "I don't know what to do," she sobbed. "Everything's gone. The house, the retirement accounts, everything. And Caleb, they're saying he might go to prison for 20 years. I don't understand how this happened." The conversation lasted over an hour, with Mom asking questions I couldn't answer and apologizing for things she still didn't fully comprehend. She admitted that she and Dad had given Caleb nearly $50,000 total over the past year, believing they were supporting a legitimate business. They had mortgaged their house to help fund what they thought was their son's entrepreneurial success. "We were so proud of him," she said through tears. "He seemed so confident, so sure of himself. And when you wouldn't help, we thought you were being cruel. We wanted to show him that his family believed in him." The irony was devastating. While condemning me for refusing to enable Caleb's fraud, my parents had unknowingly funded his criminal activities with their life savings. Their desire to prove they were more supportive than their selfish daughter had made them unwitting accomplices to their own financial destruction. "Mom, I need you to understand something," I said gently. "I didn't refuse to co-sign because I didn't believe in Caleb. I refused because the business plan didn't make sense and co-signing would have put both of us at financial risk." "But if you had helped, maybe he wouldn't have done these terrible things," she argued, still unable to see the fundamental flaw in this logic. "No, Mom. If I had co-signed, I would be facing criminal charges right now.
Caleb would have used my involvement to steal even more money from even more people. My refusal didn't cause his crimes. It prevented me from becoming his accomplice. Dad called separately the next day, and his approach was characteristically different. Instead of tears and confusion, he was angry at Caleb, at the situation, and unfortunately, still partially at me. "I know you think you are right," he said bitterly, "and maybe you were about the business, but a family should stick together. We should have figured this out together instead of everyone going their separate ways." "Dad, there was nothing to figure out. Caleb was committing fraud from the very beginning. The choice wasn't between supporting family and protecting money. It was between enabling a crime and refusing to participate." "Easy to say now that you know how it ended," he replied. "But at the time, you just seemed unwilling to take any risk for your brother." This conversation illuminated the deep dysfunction that had allowed Caleb's fraud to flourish for so long. Even facing financial ruin as a direct result of enabling Caleb's criminal activities, Dad still couldn't acknowledge that my refusal to participate had been the right decision. He was still trapped in the narrative that family loyalty required unlimited support, regardless of the consequences.
The plea negotiations stretched on for months, during which more details of Caleb's crimes emerged. The FBI discovered that he had been running similar schemes in other states, using different business names and targeting various communities. The total amount of fraud across all jurisdictions exceeded $2.3 million, involving over 100 victims. Most shocking was the revelation that Caleb had attempted to recruit Shane Wilson not as a legitimate business partner, but as a front for his fraudulent activities. Shane's technical credentials and clean background would have provided credibility for even larger fraud schemes. When Shane refused to participate and withdrew from the business, Caleb had simply continued using his name and credentials without permission. Nicole filed for divorce while Caleb was in federal custody, citing irreconcilable differences and criminal behavior. Through Rebecca, I learned that Nicole had been as deceived as everyone else. She genuinely believed they were building a legitimate business together and had no knowledge of the fraud until she discovered suspicious bank statements and confronted Caleb in November. The divorce proceedings revealed another layer of Caleb's deception. He had hidden assets, maintained secret accounts, and had been planning to divorce Nicole himself once he had accumulated enough stolen money to disappear permanently. The loving husband and devoted entrepreneur that Nicole thought she had married was as much a fabrication as TechFlow Solutions itself. In September, nearly 8 months after his arrest, Caleb accepted a plea bargain. He pleaded guilty to multiple counts of wire fraud, bank fraud, and money laundering in exchange for a sentence of 12 years in federal prison. As part of the plea agreement, he was required to cooperate with restitution efforts, though the recovered assets were far less than the total amount stolen. The sentencing hearing was the first time I had seen Caleb since that devastating family dinner almost a year earlier. He had lost significant weight in custody, and the charm that had once defined his personality was completely absent. When given the opportunity to address the court, he offered what seemed like a genuine apology to his victims, acknowledging the pain he had caused and expressing regret for his actions. But when he looked toward the gallery where our family sat, his expression was different. There was still anger there, still resentment toward those of us who had refused to enable his destruction. Even facing 12 years in prison as a direct result of his criminal choices, Caleb seemed unable to fully accept responsibility for the path that had led him there. The judge's sentencing remarks were particularly pointed. "Mr. Martinez, you exploited the trust of family members, friends, and innocent investors to fund a lifestyle of luxury and excess. Your crimes were not born from desperation or necessity, but from greed and a callous disregard for the welfare of others. The victims of your fraud include elderly retirees, small business owners, and your own parents who lost their life savings because they believed in you." As Caleb was led away to begin his sentence, I felt a complex mixture of emotions. Relief that the criminal process was finally concluded, sadness for the family that had been destroyed by his choices, and a profound gratitude that my instincts had protected me from becoming another casualty of his manipulative behavior. The real healing, however, was just beginning.
2 years have passed since Caleb began serving his federal sentence, and the landscape of my family relationships has been forever changed. The journey from that initial co-signing request to where we stand today has taught me lessons about boundaries, manipulation, and the true meaning of family loyalty that I never could have learned any other way. My relationship with my parents has slowly rebuilt, but it looks nothing like what we had before. The process began with family therapy sessions that Mom initiated after losing their home to foreclosure. Dr. Isabella Martinez, no relation despite the shared surname, helped us navigate the complex emotions and broken trust that Caleb's crimes had created. The therapy sessions were initially painful and awkward. Mom and Dad had to confront their decades-long pattern of enabling Caleb while taking my responsible behavior for granted. They had to acknowledge that their definition of family loyalty had actually enabled criminal behavior and caused harm to innocent people. I always thought being a good parent meant supporting your children's dreams, Mom said during one particularly difficult session. I couldn't see the difference between supporting Caleb and enabling his destructive choices. Dad's journey toward understanding was more challenging. His initial stance that families should stick together no matter what gradually gave way to recognition that sometimes the most loving thing you can do is refuse to enable someone's harmful behavior. "You tried to protect all of us by saying no," he admitted during one session 6 months ago. "We just couldn't see it that way at the time. We thought love meant saying yes to everything Caleb wanted." The financial consequences for my parents have been severe, but not insurmountable. They lost their house and most of their retirement savings, but they've moved into a modest apartment and are rebuilding their lives with part-time work and Social Security. More importantly, they've learned to recognize the manipulation tactics that made them vulnerable to Caleb's schemes. I've been able to help them financially in small ways, covering emergency medical expenses, contributing to their rent during particularly difficult months. But I've done so with clear boundaries and explicit agreements about what the money is for. The difference is that now they understand and respect these boundaries rather than seeing them as evidence of my selfishness. My relationship with Nicole has been an unexpected source of healing. After her divorce was finalized, she reached out to apologize for her role in the family pressure campaign. We've developed a friendship based on our shared experience of being manipulated by Caleb and our mutual commitment to building healthier relationships going forward. I spent 3 years of my marriage defending someone I didn't really know. Caleb was so good at creating the version of himself that he wanted people to see. I fell in love with a person who never actually existed. Nicole has been instrumental in helping me understand the sophisticated nature of Caleb's manipulation. She shared stories about how he would create false documentation, manufacture fake phone calls, and orchestrate elaborate deceptions to support his various schemes. The business plan he showed me was apparently one of dozens he had created for different purposes, each tailored to appeal to specific audiences. The victims of Caleb's fraud have had varying degrees of recovery. The restitution process has been slow and incomplete. Caleb's recovered assets covered less than 30% of the total stolen amount. Some victims have filed civil suits against our parents, arguing that their financial support aided in the fraud. These cases are still pending, adding another layer of stress to their already difficult situation. But there have been positive developments as well. The retired teacher was able to recover some of her losses through a victim compensation fund. The small business owner received a grant from a nonprofit organization that supports fraud victims. The elderly couple found housing assistance through their church community. While none of them were made whole, the community response to their plight has provided some measure of support and hope.
Shane Wilson has become an unlikely ally in my healing process. He reached out after Caleb's sentencing to apologize for any role his initial involvement might have played in making the fraud possible. We've stayed in touch, and his perspective on recognizing and resisting manipulation has been invaluable. The hardest part for me was admitting that I had been fooled, Shane explained during one of our conversations. I pride myself on being analytical and objective, but Caleb was able to manipulate me for months before I figured out what was really happening. Shane's experience reinforced something I've learned about sophisticated manipulators. They're skilled at identifying what each person wants to hear and crafting their approach accordingly. With Shane, Caleb emphasized technical innovation and market opportunity. With my parents, he focused on family loyalty and entrepreneurial dreams. With me, he tried guilt, family obligation, and claims about future regret.
The professional consequences of this experience have been surprisingly positive. Word spread in the accounting community about how I had refused to co-sign fraudulent loans and had cooperated with the FBI investigation. Rather than damaging my reputation, the situation enhanced my standing as someone with integrity and strong ethical standards. I've been promoted twice in the past 2 years and have been asked to speak at professional conferences about recognizing financial fraud red flags. Most importantly, I've learned to trust my instincts, even when they contradict what everyone around me is saying. The pressure to co-sign that loan wasn't just about money. It was about my family's expectation that I should prioritize their comfort over my own well-being. Learning to say no to that pressure, despite the emotional cost, was one of the most important decisions I've ever made. I've also learned that setting boundaries isn't selfish. It's necessary for healthy relationships. The family members who truly love and respect me have learned to honor those boundaries. The ones who saw my boundaries as obstacles to manipulate were the ones who never really had my best interests at heart. The story of Caleb's fraud has become a cautionary tale in our community about the difference between supporting someone's dreams and enabling their destructive behavior. I've received dozens of messages from people who recognized similar patterns in their own families and found the courage to set boundaries with their own manipulative relatives. As I write this, Caleb still has 10 years remaining on his federal sentence. He's written me several letters from prison, but I haven't responded. I hope he's using this time to develop genuine insight into his behavior and to find a path toward making amends for the harm he caused. But I've learned that I can't control his choices or his healing process. I can only control my own. What I can say with certainty is that trusting my gut when everyone around me was telling me I was wrong was the best decision I've ever made. It saved me from financial ruin, criminal liability, and the devastating guilt that would have come from enabling harm to innocent people. Sometimes the most loving thing you can do for someone is refuse to participate in their self-destruction. Sometimes protecting yourself is also protecting others. And sometimes the people who call you selfish are the ones who benefit most from your willingness to sacrifice your own well-being. What has been your most challenging family situation, and how did you find the strength to handle it? I'd love to hear your stories in the comments below. Remember to like this video if it resonated with you, subscribe to hear more real-life experiences, and share with someone who might need to know they're not alone in family struggles. Thank you for being here today, and remember that sometimes our greatest growth comes from our deepest wounds. Up next, you've got 2 more standout stories right on your screen. If this one hit the mark, you won't want to pass these up. Just click and check them out. And don't forget to subscribe and turn on the notification bell so you don't miss any upload from us.